Hello, my name's William Bond, and this is the Bond Report about troll science, which I believe you'll find quantifying a historical viewpoint. Let me hasten to add, and hasten to be clear, I'm not speaking of the tragedy of unfortunate people then oppressed by the four horsemen of old age, incontinence, boredom, neglect, and senility. For our purposes, we're analogous to the sad fact that while stupidity is from God, ignorance represents a choice. People choose to do that in the modern United States. And the population we're speaking of is for big city medical residents that are meeting people that are referred to as this group of people that occupy hospitals that have generally a word attached to them. The New York guys had their own word that I'm not going to repeat here, but they, in New Orleans, Charity Hospital, we had trolls. This is Charity Hospital and its beauty. And let me skip back in New Orleans. In statements unreliable, uncheckable, and nebulous, I am the very model of a speaking ophthalmologist. Getting in touch with your inner Gilbert and Sullivan. Potter Stewart said, I won't attempt to define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. This is defining what is a troll. Now you begin with the usual thing with troll science, a curious and inquiring mind. Here I am pursuing some field work on what I don't remember now, but it kind of hurt. Investigation is inspecting things. In that case, we're buying a peg of whiskey. The world is full of opinion, but real science is scarce. You got to do those things. There's a lot of pseudoscience, fake science, and you see this in grand rounds all the time. And pardon me, young man, but I'm a pseudoscientist, and I am sure there must be a pseudoscientific explanation for what you're saying. You know, we're hoping our true research findings will get the recognition they deserve, perhaps some more major funding, and perhaps we should be worried that this will in fact come true. So let's get scientific. Are you a Gemini? When is it science? How do we aspire past mere anecdotal things? How does something become a science? Lord Kelvin said, when you can measure what you're speaking about in numbers, you can express it in numbers, now you know something about it. When you cannot measure it in numbers, when you cannot express it in numbers, your knowledge, in his phrase, common in science, is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. And this requires a lot of hard work, unfortunately, to redeem. Our understanding with the troll things of who and what we share the earth with is a startling thing. And the most startling thing is how real it is. This is a deep sea anglerfish, and he's a charmer. Now, in the movies, there they are. But the scary thing about this is that guy and this guy, the least scary one turns out to be the least real. That movie one was kind of a joke. These guys are as real as a broken lake. In the same way that Isaac Stern said there's more bad musicians than there is bad music. Unfortunately, that's not true with science. Many scientists, we have what's called science envy. There's Sigmund Freud. We envy the sciences, the real sciences, the people doing the lab work, the people doing the field work, the abstruse equations that you can find. So we don't want to be meager and unsatisfactory. We want to have quantitative knowledge. Now, we started with what do we call our science, and we've reluctantly gone with troll science. Now, that is because in the same manner that organizations with the word liberation in their title have never liberated anyone or anything. This is the same thing. One of the things to be careful of, and one of the ways you can tell this, something is not a science is if it has science in the name. Political science, creation science, Scientology, social science, please. Come on. Troll studies, that sounds like you're some eager beaver grad student with your notebook in your hand trying to do stuff. So we went with troll science, although now all science, you want to get quantitative. Ernst Rutherford said this, one of the early guys to study the atom. All science is either physics or stamp collecting, But troll points, the idea was to introduce to scientific and mathematical rigor, some science, into the study of trollism, its natural history, presentations, manifestations, expected courses and outcomes, get it to a real public health implication, a true study. Trollism is like obscenity. As I said before, it's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. The presentations, medically speaking, are extraordinarily variable. You could have a full-blown trollitis, perhaps even with a fulminant trollemia, or the next case might involve subtle trollopathies, indicating the presence of a previously unsuspected trolloma. And it was lying there. A modest beginning would be to assign, I thought, every science has a, if you will, founding father/genius that would be to assign number values to various universally agreed upon. Residents live in the same world. It's regular United Nations when you talk to each other, but you live in the same world. And we would accumulate these points in the manner of Olympic scoring and a troll score or a troll quotient. So your field work for your science can get a base, a beginning. Troll points were assigned from the extensive experience of the investigators, best defined by example. And some truly impressive scores were had, some things that it was hard to assign unit points for things, but it can be done. And I'll give an example. If you have a science, you have to have numbers, so your knowledge is of a meager and unsatisfactory kind. For instance, the measurement of pulchritude. Helen of Troy was the face that launched 1,000 ships, and therefore, the beauty to launch one ship is 1 millihelen. And from that, you can derive scientific units. We haven't come up with a troll name for our troll points. Now, it was done, it was an arbitrary element, but it could be pretty universally agreed upon, and it was done in the manner of a figure skating judge. Now, what was the artistic impression? Did the player complete all of the technical elements? How was that score arrived at? The Bulgarian judge gave us there was a certain arbitrary element, but, for instance, just as an example of troll points, I did an 11-page handout one night on call at Charity Hospital, and I've had to distill it drastically here. But if your history began, initial history, what happened to you? I was minding my own business. 4 points, I only had a couple of beers. Who, me? That's 3 points right there. Well, there were these 2 dudes. Never 1 dudes, never 3 dudes. It's 2 dudes. There were these 2 dudes. Bonus points were given for the use of more than one of those, and occasionally people would run the troll hat trick and do 3, and occasionally all 4 of those elements would be in your initial history, which would be the troll Grand Slam. Now, our pioneering efforts, we at Charity Hospital LSU, took what I believe is pardonable pride in trying to begin and quantifying this. Tattoos. Now, this is before everybody wore a tattoo, but this was when it was less common. If you wore a tattoo, you'd been in the service, particularly the Navy, or you were a guy who wore a tattoo. Now, you got a half-point tattoo, but there were bonuses. Homemade jailhouse, obscene, misspelled, but extra for various combinations of homemade jailhouse, obscene, misspelled, or what the location is. And these could interact in various ways, like you can double a triple score and do things like a Scrabble game. And the extra points were awarded a little arbitrarily for verve imagination, style, and technique, in this case, graded in negative numbers, meaning lack of technique. Further troll points could be had by outside people. Visible weapons carried by your visitors were 2 points per weapon, which you tripled if the visitor was the one who shot or stabbed you in the first place. And that could add up to some fairly impressive scores. I had one guy who I don't remember having visitors, who I had a chest x-ray that I had duplicated and kept as a souvenir. And this guy's had 11 different types of projectiles in his chest. He had shotgun pellets, bullets of various calibers, fragments of this and that, and 12 points. An example, over 15 visitors around your bed at any one time. Visitors with only 3 felony convictions, counted twice. You give a little bonus for that. Certain visitors, 1 point per weapon, the visible weapons. Medical consult recommends euthanasia. I never did have that one. But the history, once again, this dude more than several times at Charity Hospital, being New Orleans, I more than once had hired voodoo ladies, hired to chant, and, or the chief complaint was non-contributory. Climbs off the table during eye surgery, 5 points if it's local, 20 points if it's general. I never had that one happen, though I certainly had some 5-pointers. And half a point per the usual antipsychotic drugs. And a smell that's hard to define, but won't quite go away. Once the patient had physically left, the more intensifying it was a thing to fumigate / disinfect / burn and explode the place where they'd been staying was awarded some points. Greasy food containers, or the greasy food itself, littered everywhere around the bed. The kickers were in there if you weighed over 400 pounds, were already grossly diabetic, and if you were being put on a sliding scale to control your diabetes, with a rudimentary thing of fatness that if you had to hold your hands out, see if you were walking or rolling, and that's the way you define that. So investigators were divided in some things, but once again, science marches on. There were suggestions in various degrees of seriousness that I actually remember considering on call one night, where you would take, say, half a dozen of these folks and fasten them in some way, lash them to the hood of a car and run it through the car wash. Just be sure to keep your eyes closed. Be sure you have that clear and wear some eye and ear protection. But there were nights when that sounded like a hell of an idea. So, goodbye from New Orleans, and Charity Hospital bids you goodbye. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Bond Reports. Collect them all.